Germany didn't announce a new weapon. It activated a technology Russia never prepared for. Just a Russian-style drone sliced out of the sky by a beam invisible to the human eye. For years, Europe watched Russia flood Ukraine with Shahed swarms, glide bombs, and decoys designed to bankrupt air defenses through sheer volume. Germany watched too, and then built something that ended the math behind that threat. After more than 100 live-fire trials at sea, Germany's high-energy laser left the classified halls of naval development and entered real operational testing. And when it did, one fact became impossible to ignore. Russia's cheapest weapon just met a defender that fires at the speed of light for the price of a cup of coffee. A €10 beam that melts drones worth thousands. A weapon with no magazines, no reloads, no logistics burden. A system that doesn't warn targets or reveal itself on radar. A defense platform that can fire continuously as long as electricity exists. Germany's laser is the first European weapon proven to destroy aerial targets over open sky. A technological milestone even the United States took decades to refine. And now, as it moves from shipboard trials to land-based testing, it targets the very foundation of Russia's drone warfare strategy. Not a missile, not a cannon. A beam that rewrites the rules of interception. And Germany didn't just develop it, Germany is preparing to scale it. Because once Europe understood that every Shahed Russia launch costs 30,000 euros, while every laser shot costs 10 euros, the drone war can be flipped. Russia's advantage can be turned into its vulnerability. This is how Germany's laser went live. And this is why Russia should be worried. Russia believed it had found the perfect weapon for a long war. Not missiles, not tanks, but numbers. Wave after wave of Shahed drones, 300, sometimes 500 in a single assault, thrown at Ukraine like disposable ammunition. A 3,000 euro airframe carrying cheap electronics and explosives, launched in flocks large enough to drown radar screens and force defenders into a financial nightmare. Every drone that lifted off from Russian territory carried the same message. Let's see how much you can afford to shoot. Ukraine's interceptors cost 100,000 to 150,000 euros per launch, and Russia's drones cost less than a family used car. The Kremlin didn't need precision. It didn't need stealth. It just needed volume, because volume cracks budgets faster than cities. And Europe watched this imbalance widen with every attack. Patriots were firing million-euro missiles at machines built from plywood and imported engines. Iris-T batteries were running low on interceptors. Germany, France, Poland, every country feeding Ukraine defensive missiles saw their stockpiles shrink, while Russia simply ordered more drones from Iran and domestic assembly lines. This wasn't a tactical threat anymore, it was a strategic one. And Europe understood the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. Missile defense cannot scale fast enough to stop a country willing to spend cheaply and attack endlessly. NATO simulation models began to show catastrophic curves. Russia ramping drone output, Ukraine draining interceptors, European stockpiles collapsing faster than production could recover. A single year of Russian drone saturation could consume 5 years of European missile manufacturing capacity. The math didn't work, the doctrine didn't work, the assumptions didn't work, and Germany, quiet, technical, methodical Germany, saw a problem that missiles could never solve. Why Germany and not the United States? Because Germany was the only nation in Europe already sitting on a decade of directed energy research that had matured quietly in the background. The US had larger, bulkier laser programs tied to specific platforms. Germany had something modular, containerized, and most importantly, operationally realistic. Russia's drone war exposed the one weakness modern air defense could not hide. You cannot win a financial fight with weapons that cost 100 times more than what they're shooting down. Berlin realized that the only way to stop a cheap threat was with something even cheaper, and infinitely faster. Which leads directly to the weapon Germany built to flip Russia's entire model on its head. During its sea trials aboard the frigate Saxon, the German high-energy laser didn't perform well. It performed flawlessly. Each trial was designed to break the system. Unstable maritime weather, rolling decks, shifting horizons, vibration, and the constant motion of a warship cutting through open water. Under every condition, the laser tracked, locked, and burned through its targets. Not one missed shot, not one failure to engage, and the targets weren't staged props. They were real threats. Drones approaching at unpredictable angles, small craft moving across choppy surfaces, airborne objects tested at varying distances to stress the beam's stability. What mattered wasn't the appearance. It was the behavior. Germany needed to know if the laser could think fast enough, turn fast enough, and stay on target long enough to kill. It did. But the breakthrough wasn't the accuracy. It was where the kills happened. The German laser became the first European system to destroy aerial targets against an open blue sky, with no mountains, terrain, or dark backgrounds to help the optics. That's a milestone the defense industry rarely talks about publicly, because hitting a drone against the sky is exponentially harder than hitting it against Earth. The target blends. The heat signature is weaker. The margin for beam drift is almost zero. Germany solved all of that, quietly. And then, instead of celebrating, Berlin did something far more revealing. It moved the system off the ship and into WTD-91, the country's top weapons testing facility. That transfer wasn't symbolic. It meant the Navy had already learned what it needed to learn at sea. The real task now was validating land-based engagement, the environment Ukraine desperately needs defended. No press tours, no loud announcements, just a containerized laser quietly driven into Meppen, where engineers are now pushing it through the next phase, defending against the exact threats Russia launches every night. And to understand that, we have to look inside the beam itself. A missile intercept explodes near its target. A laser intercept erases the target's ability to fly. Germany's weapon isn't a spotlight with heat, it's a fiber laser architecture built to concentrate destructive power into a point smaller than a coin. At its core is a 20 kilowatt beam module, but the design doesn't stop at 20. The architecture is meant to scale past 50, past 100, into the range where a laser becomes not just a drone killer, but a missile killer. The power is only half the story. The real weapon is the optics. Rheinmetall engineered a stabilization and guidance system that can keep that beam locked on a spot the size of a €1 coin from a kilometer away. It doesn't matter if the target is wobbling, climbing, or twisting in wind turbulence. The optics compensate in milliseconds, adjusting the beam so the energy remains pinned to the same microscopic impact point. And when that point heats, it heats fast. The laser delivers gigawatt-level energy density at contact, not for minutes, for seconds. In those seconds, the material under the beam doesn't burn, it fails, composites delaminate, plastics vaporize, battery casings rupture, control surfaces warp. A drone doesn't explode, it simply loses flight authority and falls out of the sky. Just a kill so clean that sensors on the battlefield barely register it. And unlike missiles, lasers don't require preparation, no arming sequence, no launcher elevation, no trajectory calculation. The shot leaves at light speed, which means the reaction time is effectively zero. If the target is in line of sight, the engagement has already begun. The only limitation is dwell time, the fraction of a second needed to burn a hole through the airframe. This is the difference between explosive kill and thermal kill. Missiles overpower. Lasers undermine. Missiles destroy by force. Lasers destroy by physics. And physics is cheaper. Because after all this, after the tracking, the stabilization, the beam focusing, the cost of firing that gigawatt level burst is not 10,000 euros, not 1,000 euros, but around 10 euros, which is where the war's economics collapse and Russia's strategy begins to unravel. Russia's drone war was never about accuracy. It was about bankruptcy. Moscow didn't need every Shah-Head to hit. It only needed Ukraine and Europe to keep paying 100,000 to 150,000 euros every time one appeared. That imbalance wasn't a tactical advantage. It was a long-term economic trap designed to drain NATO's stockpiles faster than Russia spent money on replacements. Germany's laser system detonates that model without ever producing an explosion. A 10 euro shot erases a 3,000 euro drone. A 10 euro shot erases a 30,000 euro Shah-Head. A 10 euro shot erases Russia's entire assumption that cheap attackers can overwhelm expensive defenders. This is why the shift is not technological. It's financial warfare turned upside down. Lasers have no magazine. As long as the generator runs, the weapon fires. There is no supply chain, no reload truck, no manufacturing delay, no need to call a NATO partner begging for more missiles after a heavy night of interceptions. Missiles require a factory, lasers require electricity. Russia's saturation doctrine depends on depleting interceptor stockpiles. But you cannot deplete a weapon that effectively fires forever. A drone swarm is only effective if each drone forces the defender to sacrifice something. Money, ammunition, time, logistics. A laser sacrifices nothing. Whether Russia sends 10 drones or 500, the defender's cost barely changes. The Kremlin's most cost-effective weapon suddenly becomes the least efficient choice on the battlefield. This doesn't just weaken Russia's drone model, it exposes the vulnerabilities Russia has been hiding behind the illusion of quantity. And those vulnerabilities become impossible to ignore when we examine how Russia's tactics collide with laser defense. Russia built its drone doctrine on 3 assumptions: overwhelm, deceive, penetrate. Germany's laser system tears all 3 apart at the root. Swarms only work if defenders pay for every drone they shoot down. But when each intercept costs about €10, the logic behind mass assault evaporates. 10 drones, 50 drones, 500. None of it matters if the defender's financial burden barely registers. For the first time since Russia introduced Shahed saturation, quantity is no longer a weapon. It's a liability. Every drone Russia launches now becomes a loss with no guaranteed return because the defender is no longer using high-value missiles. They're using electricity. The math that once favored Russia now turns against it. Russia's Gerbera and Paroya decoys were never meant to kill. They were meant to trick. Foam airframes and cheap wooden copies designed to force Ukraine to waste real interceptors, reveal radar signatures, and open gaps in coverage for the actual strike drone that followed. Lasers make that entire strategy meaningless. A decoy forces no expenditure, no missile leaves the launcher, no radar lights up in panic, no gap opens in Ukraine's defense network. A €10 laser shot removes a €200 decoy without the defender blinking. Russia loses its ability to probe, lose its ability to map, lose its ability to exhaust. And without the draining effect of decoys, every follow-up attack becomes more predictable and more vulnerable. And Russian drones fly low, 200 to 300 meters, because ground clutter disrupts radar and complicates missile guidance. It's a tactic that has worked for years, exploiting the physics of conventional air defense. Lasers don't care about that altitude. Lasers see what the optics see. If the target is in line of sight, the engagement is already underway. Optical tracking identifies a shape, locks the beam, and holds it there until the airframe fails. Low altitude becomes a disadvantage, not an advantage. The drone has less room to maneuver, less time to evade, and more predictable flight patterns. Russia loses the last sanctuary its drones relied on. These aren't minor weaknesses, these are foundational cracks in Russia's entire unmanned warfare strategy. And Germany is not stopping with shipboard trials or stationary tests. The real shift happens when this laser doesn't defend a frigate or a proving ground, when it rolls onto the battlefield and begins shaping the airspace over Europe, which is exactly where the next phase of Germany's deployment is heading. Germany didn't build its laser to sit in a lab, it built it to deploy everywhere. The first operational versions are scheduled for the German Navy by 2029, integrated into warships where drones, fast attack craft, and low-flying threats are constant hazards. At sea, a laser is more than a weapon. It's an insurance, a silent shield that never runs out, never misfires, never hesitates. But Germany knows the real urgency isn't offshore. It's inland, where Russia's drones strike every night. That's why, after proving itself at sea, the laser system was moved to WTD-91 for land-based trials. The threats being tested now are the same ones Ukraine faces: Shahed skimming low, Lancet loitering munitions, improvised drones flying unpredictable paths. Germany wants the weapon validated for ground deployment before mass production even begins, and production isn't aimed at ships alone. Rheinmetall is already designing truck-mounted variants, compact enough to follow mobile brigades and powerful enough to create roaming air defense bubbles. These aren't theoretical sketches. They're the direct successor to the containerized demonstrator. Germany intends to place lasers where conventional interceptors can't be spared, and where a €10 shot saves a €150,000 missile for something that actually merits it. The architecture that begins at 20 kilowatts isn't capped there. Germany engineered it to climb past 50, past 100, toward the energy levels required to burn through cruise missiles mid-flight, incinerate incoming artillery shells, and one day challenge the leading edge of hypersonic glide vehicles. That's not ambition. That's the engineering roadmap already laid out in public and military briefs. A Europe that once relied on missiles for everything is now preparing a tier where beams replace boosters. This is the shift Germany is driving. Not a single weapon, but a distributed network of laser nodes on ships, trucks, and fixed sites, each one capable of defending the airspace above it with negligible cost and near-instant reaction time. And once Germany scales, it won't scale alone. Because Europe is not simply adding lasers, it's preparing to transform its entire defense doctrine around them. For the first time since the Cold War, Europe is rewriting its air defense doctrine from the ground up, and Germany's laser is the catalyst. Not because it's futuristic, not because it's elegant, but because it introduces something Europe has never had before: a weapon that cannot be exhausted. Missile batteries have limits. Intercepting drones drains stockpiles, budgets, and industrial capacity. But a laser doesn't run out of ammunition, it runs on power. This is the foundation of Europe's new doctrine: the infinite magazine, an air defense layer that can stay active for hours, days, weeks, without ever asking for more missiles or more reloads. This alone changes engagement psychology. A commander who knows he has 5 interceptors behaves differently from a commander who effectively has 5,000 shots for the cost of pocket change. And engagement time shrinks too. A missile might take 30 seconds to intercept a target. A laser takes seconds, from detection to burn through. When you stack those two realities, endless ammunition and near-instant kill cycles, you get a defensive posture that starts to resemble a shield, not a battery. But Europe isn't discarding its missiles, it's just reorganizing them. Lasers take the bottom layer: drones, decoys, glide bombs, loitering munitions, and anything designed to overwhelm by numbers. Missiles take the upper layer: cruise missiles, ballistic threats, high-value targets requiring standoff destruction. Electronic warfare fills the middle: jamming, spoofing, and confusion operations that slow incoming waves before they reach the laser layer. It's a stacked architecture where each tier protects the others. Each failure mode is backed by another. And each engagement is chosen based on cost, physics, and practicality, not panic or scarcity. NATO saw the writing early. The alliance began drafting directed energy integration plans even before Germany completed its maritime trials. Now, multiple member states, France, the Netherlands, Italy, the UK, are preparing procurement paths for their own systems. Germany simply became the first to prove a European laser works in operational conditions. That proof triggered a shift from theory to inevitability. Defense markets reacted instantly. The global directed energy sector, worth $6.7 billion in 2024, is projected to multiply over the next decade, and Europe intends to lead it. And this doctrine isn't being shaped for Europe alone. It's being shaped for the battlefield where the need is the most urgent, the threats are the most relentless, and the economics are the most brutal. Ukraine. Ukraine has never lacked courage. It has lacked something far more decisive: a defense system that doesn't bleed its resources dry. The country has spent 2 years firing world-class missiles at bottom-tier Russian drones. Every successful intercept protected a city but drained the nation. But these lasers disrupt that trap, and Ukraine isn't starting from zero. Kiev already unveiled its Tri-Zub laser platform, a domestic system with a 5-kilometer reach and engagement altitudes up to 2 kilometers. It's an early-generation weapon, but it proves Ukraine is thinking in the right direction, replacing missile waste with directed energy efficiency. What Ukraine lacks is scale, and scale is exactly what Germany is preparing to deliver. Once Germany finalizes testing at WTD-91, the path shifts from experimentation to manufacturing. Laser systems are not like missile factories. Once production begins, components can be built in parallel, system modules can be assembled faster, and deployment can ramp aggressively. Germany has the industrial depth Ukraine does not, and this opens the first real opportunity to saturate Ukraine's defense grid with costless intercept capability. The projected timeline is realistic, not speculative: 2025 to 2026. Land-based validation and environmental hardening, 2027. Production decisions and industrial acceleration, 2029. First operational naval systems with land variants ready for export, late 2020s. Transfer window for Ukrainian mobile laser units and mobile units are the key. Truck-mounted lasers are exactly the type of defense Ukraine needs to counter Russia's 2 most dangerous low-cost weapons: Shahed drones, which attack cities, energy sites, and ports; Lancet loitering munitions, which hunt artillery and armored vehicles. Both rely on the same principle: cheap, persistent pressure. Both collapse under a weapon that intercepts without cost. A laser team on a single truck can guard a frontline battery, a logistics hub, or a convoy route without burning through Patriot missiles or Iris-T interceptors. Heavy air defense assets can finally be saved for aircraft, ballistic threats, and cruise missiles, the targets worthy of their price. This separation of roles, lasers for swarms, missiles for precision threats, is exactly what Ukraine has never had. And once the two systems operate side by side, Russia's drone strategy stops being a threat and becomes a burden. Every Shahed Russia launches becomes a loss. Every Lancet becomes a failed investment. For the first time in the war, Ukraine would stop paying more than Russia for every aerial engagement. And once economics shift, battlefield momentum follows. Because when the cost of defense collapses, the entire structure of Russian strategy starts to collapse with it. Russia spent years perfecting a warfare model built on one assumption. If you make your weapons cheap enough and numerous enough, no one can afford to stop them forever. And that era is over. Germany's laser system, and the doctrine emerging around it, shatters the core advantage Russia relied on. The Kremlin's cheapest asset becomes the first to lose strategic value. The entire drone ecosystem Russia built with Iran's help suddenly hits a wall that economics, not missiles, erected. The change is brutal and simple. A 3,000 euro Shahed no longer drains 100,000 euros from the defender. A 200 euro decoy no longer maps the battlefield. A drone swarm no longer forces panic, expenditure, or exhaustion. Instead, every drone launched becomes a guaranteed loss for Russia, and every wave of drones becomes a self-inflicted financial wound. Saturation, Russia's favorite tactic, turns against its creator. What used to overwhelm becomes irrelevant. What used to break defenses becomes background noise. What used to bleed NATO now bleeds Moscow. Europe's posture transforms as well. For the first time, the continent's air defense strategy is cost-dominant, not cost-burdened. The defender dictates the expense of the engagement. The attacker pays more with every launch, every swarm, every miscalculation. This inversion is catastrophic for a country leaning on cheap drones to compensate for missile shortages and precision deficiencies. The battlefield begins to evolve into something Russia has never fought against. A laser-managed airspace, where swarms are not a threat but a statistic. Targets queued, tracked, and erased in seconds for negligible cost. Drone warfare was supposed to define this decade. Germany's breakthrough suggests it may not even define the next few years. What happens when swarms no longer matter? What happens when numbers stop being overwhelming? What happens when the cheapest weapon becomes the most ineffective? A war model built on attrition cannot survive when the attrition collapses. And that is the shift unfolding now, quietly, steadily, and permanently. So if Germany just erased the core advantage of Russia's drone war, what does this new battlefield mean for the future of conflict itself? Germany didn't just test a laser, it rewrote the economics of air defense. One 10 euro shot now erases a weapon Russia built an entire strategy around, and there is nothing cheap or simple Moscow can deploy to counter it. This is Europe's first operational laser, and it marks a doctrinal shift from ammunition to energy, from limited magazines to limitless defense. Russia's drone era isn't ending because Europe found a stronger weapon. It's ending because Europe found a smarter one. And as lasers scale from ships to trucks to frontline nodes, a new battlefield is emerging. One where swarms, decoys, and attrition tactics no longer matter. If Germany just broke Russia's cheapest weapon, what happens when lasers start challenging its most expensive ones? We have to wait and see. Literally. If you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into geopolitics. We would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.